Hello, everyone. I'm Heather with Magnificent Mamas, and we're joined here today with author S.A. Schneider. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Heather. Hello. How are you doing, everybody? I go by S.A. Schneider. You can call me Steven. And as you can tell, Heather and I were talking. I've got Star Wars. That's one of my favorite things in the world. And I write middle grade fantasy for kids.
Awesome. So when you say middle grade fantasy, are we thinking more like middle schoolers or...
That's my goal, fifth through like seventh, eighth grade. But I noticed I've got a lot of like third and fourth graders. So it's somewhere within that range, let's say. It depends on the kid. You know, when I was 10 years old, I went from reading Hardy Boy books up to reading Stephen King. So it's difficult for me to judge what level something should be for kids. And I've seen kids, they grab those Harry Potter books, those 800-page Harry Potter books, and they're in like third and fourth grade. So, it depends on the kid. My bigger goal is just to make something interesting for the kids to read, and hopefully they want to get the next one.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I write, middle grade fantasy. And what you asked about with the kids, that's the goal, is to get them reading more. And I also push kids writing and telling story, because I think that's huge and important, and we don't do enough of it sometimes. And so I put resources in the books to help with that. And I also push a lot with video game storytelling.
So tell me a little bit about your book.
So the book is called Town Magician. It's the Town Magician series. Actually, it started off as a short story. We have here, I live by Kent State, and every year they do a Wizarding World Festival based on Harry Potter, though they can't call it. I wanted to be a part of that and put up an author table, but I didn't have any wizard magic type stories or anything to go for that. So I said, okay, I'll write a short story. If nothing else, I can, give it away. People could sign up for my mailing list, just something. And so I came up with a short story about this world, fantasy world, where magicians are the rulers of the towns. It's still kind of medieval like fantasy, small towns, but we don't have the soldiers, we have magicians. And it turns out that this kid wants to be a magician, but he wasn't born with magic, can't do magic. You're either born with it or not.
Yeah.
And then he finds out their town magician is a fake, and no one believes him. And then an evil wizard comes to challenge the town magician to a duel. So now the town magician saying, oh, well, I'm going to go train with the grand wizard. And our hero, Sam, doesn't believe him and tags along, and also secretly hopes that maybe the Grand Wizard can help him find his own match. So they go on an adventure.
Nice. It sounds interesting for sure.
If you like fantasy, that's the idea.
Oh, yeah.
And you like Star Wars, I have subtle little Star Wars references in there.
Nice.
The town they live in is Tatooine, very close to Tatooine. So there's a few other little references, Easter eggs for the adults that may be reading it with the kids.
Do you find that a lot of adults read it with the children?
It depends on the age. I have found some parents and grandparents reading it to their kids because it's fun, adventurous, and it's an easy read. It's not trying to be overly complicated or anything. So they can read it with their kids and enjoy it. But, like me, when I was young, I read myself early and didn't have I don't remember my mother reading stories to me. I've read since like age 6. So
yeah,
I hope there's a lot of kids that are interested in reading that were like me.
I feel like they get so distracted nowadays with game systems and electronics and whatnot that reading sometimes can be pushed to the back burner, which is something I want to work towards changing.
Yes, which is why I mentioned I do a bit of a focus, some classes and work on video game storytelling, because that piques the kids' interest. And it is something that they could work on now and build up to have a career in that later. So it's not something that, I'll wait till I'm out of high school and go to college and get a degree in video game storytelling. It doesn't work that way, and they can start right now. I've taught kids in classes as young as third and fourth grade working on video games and how to tell stories within video games.
That's awesome. I think that's really cool because you're working with them with what they are interested in. And I don't know a kid nowadays who isn't interested in video games.
Exactly. You get them into story through the back door, you might say.
Who would you say is your favorite author?
Well, okay, so I've read Stephen King since I was young and always loved Stephen King. But I love Michael Crichton, his books, combination of the science and the fiction and using real, like science and real theories and things that could be. I love how he mixes that all together. I've got a newer favorite author by the name of Jeff Strand. I gotten to know him a little bit. In fact, I'm going to see him in a couple weeks. He writes mostly what I would describe as adult Goosebumps books. They're horror with a whole lot of comedy, sometimes subtle comedy, sometimes twisted. So not necessarily for everybody. I'd say that's probably my 3 favorite authors I can think of off the top of my head.
I was just talking about the Goosebump books and R.L. Stine on my last video.
Well, he's from Cleveland or lived in Cleveland for a while. So we've got a little bit of claim to fame for the Goosebumps there.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, but I guess that kind of makes sense with where some of the books are kind of portrayed to be at.
Yeah. The Goosebumps books were definitely, I was a little too old for them, though I have read some in more recent times, just because that's kind of, the feel I want to get is that. So why not go with a master? But my kids loved Goosebumps books.
How's your family? Are they supportive of your writing? And
yes, my son is one of my better beta readers. He has no problem telling me what sucks and what I missed and messed up, which is great because the first book I wrote, it was kind of a superhero-ish book. So there's kind of an origin story. The girl is a foster child. She's having a good life with her foster parents, but then the bad guys show up and they kill the foster parents. And my mother couldn't stand that. She thought it was horrible. And I'm like, but they gotta die. It makes sense for the story. And
they have to. Yeah. Sometimes you gotta lose, parents or a main character or something to make the story, where it's going. So how many books have you wrote to date?
I've written several, but haven't published all of them. I've got several published right now. The Town Magician, book 1, book 2 is going to be coming out this fall. It's done, going through editing. Cover's already made. That'll be coming out soon. I've got a couple other books with some short stories. I'm wanting to get out, I keep mentioning video games. I want to get out a book. Basically, the class I teach, put it into a book. So people who can't come to my class can get the book and learn video game storytelling.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about video game storytelling?
Sure. I went to a conference several years ago. Some friends of mine were throwing the conference, author friends. There was a lot of talk about this, that, and the other thing. And I don't even remember where the idea sparked, but it was in my head while I'm listening to one of the presentations that, find what you enjoy and do it. And I started thinking along those lines, what do kids enjoy? We want them to read, and what we keep, and this is one of my pet peeves with school. Well, we want kids to read, so let's make them read To Kill a Mockingbird, which they don't like. And I'm not saying Kill a Mockingbird's a bad book, and I'm not saying all kids hate it, but in general, if kids aren't reading, shoving To Kill a Mockingbird at them is not going to get them interested. And I see how we need to do that more in school. And I also think we teach grammar and spelling way too early. We have a focus on grammar and spelling, but these kids don't read and they haven't made sentences. So it's all out in the yonder. It doesn't mean anything to them. So by the time they start working on stories and things, then they kind of lost interest. It's not clicking. I think if we just worried about telling stories for the first couple grades, that when they start learning the grammar and spelling, it would be so much easier for them. Based on my own experiences in life, we do it backwards and think that's what we got to do, but I think it's the wrong way. I was thinking about all of this because I always have this philosophy when I'm hearing an author talk about what they do, and there's a lady talking about serial fiction. What she does is she writes romance type book. What she does is on her website, January 1st through July 1st, she puts one part of a serial every day. She has it all written out and it's all planned, and it just boom, every day appears. And you have to pay to get access to that. Well, her fans love it and they all pay for it. And, she makes good money doing that. And like everybody around me start going, oh, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense for everybody. Romance, yes. No. But if you're making military science fiction, you're not going to get military sci-fi guys paying you to read part of a story every day. It's just not the right thing. And so I started thinking, I'm like, what you need to do whenever something like this comes about is take it as what you can do with it for your own use and benefit, how it would work for you. Twist it, turn it, change it, whatever. And that's when I said, well, heck, I really like video games, but I don't get to, play video games as much because I'm working. But if I taught kids how to make video games, I'd be immersed in video games all the time. And I knew some people in the industry, that's what they do. They're narrative designers and they write stories for video games. And I talked to them and interviewed them. And I came up with a class that uses a system called Bloxels, which is a lot like Minecraft. It's a board, 13 by 13 board, and you take colored block and you put it on the board to lay out the screen of the video game. And then literally the app takes a picture of it and turns all the colored blocks into walls or bad guys or coins or whatever. And then you just move your guy and start playing the video game. Quick and easy. Everybody can get into it. So then I like I said before, come in with the back door, let's come up with a story. Now let's make the video game that fits that story that we're coming up with.
Yeah.
So I think it accomplishes multiple things. It gets kids interested, shows them something they can do as a career, and they're working on telling stories, which hopefully then gets them interested in reading stories.
And that's so important. It really is.
Yeah.
Reading, writing, and I agree completely. My daughter, she's got ADHD and dyslexia, so reading and writing has never been her strong suit. And she's just recently gotten into audiobooks, and now she's constantly listening to audiobooks all the time.
So here's an exercise that I've thought of, because I've had other parents talk about that. Oh, yeah, they don't read. They can't sit still, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but do they like to tell stories? Well, yeah, sometimes. I'm like, so why don't you get a recorder, get your phone with a record app and record them telling a story? And then we've got 500 million different things nowadays that translate that into words. They don't have to sit there and type it. They tell the story and get the words. And then you just print it out, staple it. You've got a beginning of a book. But now you can start going through it. And it's different. Google Translate or whatever may catch most of it, but did it get the right thing? How do we spell that word and make sure all the spelling and the grammar? And yes, you can pass all that through other tools that will take care of all the spelling and grammar. But that's how I've talked to parents, and like, that's a great exercise, because kids get intimidated when they're a blank page and they are trying to write a story. But if you get a kid talking and telling a story, they will go on, and you capture it. We've got the tools. Why not? That's something that I've talked with others about.
I agree completely. I mean, technology has advanced so much. I mean, you've got Grammarly that'll check your grammar and spelling and whatnot. I mean, even Word or Google Docs has spelling checkers. And
a lot of parents get like, oh, I wouldn't let them use that. I'd make them do it. I'd blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but the problem is every generation that forces kids to not do something, that's what all the kids want to go. The other problem is they're growing up with these tools. These tools are not going away. They will become immersed in their lives completely. Wholeheartedly agree. We need to still teach grammar. We still need to teach spelling and all that. But as I just said, kid can talk into a microphone and it records the whole story, turns it into text. He can shove it through Grammarly, or I like Pro Writing Aid myself. Shove it into that and it puts the commas in, it spells everything right, and then he prints it out and he's done. So is the goal to force them to understand all the grammar rules, or is the goal to get the story done, or whatever it happens to be? And I know using those tools, Pro Writing Aid, it doesn't just do all the changes. It marks them, and you have to decide if you want to do it or not, because not always is it correct. There are times it's incorrect. I myself have learned a lot of rules for writing and better ways of saying things, or when to put the semicolons in. I have problems with semicolons. Because of using Pro Writing Aid, I can read what it tells me as to why I should put a semicolon in. And now I know. And the next time when I go through, hey, look, it didn't tell me I needed semicolons because I already put them all in. I know that now. So I understand parents want their kids to spell and all that, but we also have to understand they're go live in a totally different world with these tools, and trying to keep them from the tools just won't work. And it may put them further behind later in life because they won't be as comfortable and familiar. We should learn to use the tools to help teach them as to where they're at. Our school system has seriously only been the way it is for 100 years or less. Before that, it was totally different. So always constantly changing. We can't say that everything we decided this is what education is and what we're teaching. Do we really know it's completely right? Because we've only got 60, 70 years of actual data to show. And maybe we need to think of it differently and change it more, not be so rigid.
I completely 100% understand where you're coming from. And I agree. Some things we need to evaluate, and we need to evaluate what's the bigger picture that we want, understood, I guess, would kind of be.
Right. I still know adults that whatever they do for a job can't spell, but they don't have to because their phone does it, Word does it. Everything they do for their job does the spelling for them, or it's such a minimal amount they have to worry about. Again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. But for those people, 12, 13 years of schooling with learning all these spelling words has not done a single thing for them later in life. Kids know how to use the tools available. That's something they'll do later in life. And that's why I show the video games and storytelling, because it's something that they can continue using later in life.
I agree completely. I'm curious what you'd say about some of the math that they teach in schools now.
Oh, don't get me started on that. I had that struggle with my stepson, that he just was not clicking with math. He would learn a lesson, but he wouldn't transfer that knowledge to the next lesson because they all build on each other. So he was completely having to relearn all the back information every lesson he did, and he was just struggling. He couldn't do it. That was in middle school. Now in high school, he's doing wonderful. Math is one of his better subjects. So quite possibly, I would like to say that all the struggle we did to try and get him to understand all that paid off benefits now.
Does he use math a lot, would you say?
No, he's a acting kid, band kid, choir kid. So chances of him being an accountant are pretty slim.
I think they go a little too far on some of it myself, but that's just me. And it's kind of funny because I homeschool my daughter. So I think the fact that I've got to teach her stuff that I think she might not necessarily use in life is hilarious.
And doesn't everybody say that? I saw a meme going around lately. During tax season, I'm so glad that I learned all the dates for the Civil War and not how to do my taxes, or, something along those lines.
Do you have anything else you want to say about your books or upcoming projects or anything?
Well, like I said, Town Magician 2 is coming out this fall. There are about 7 books planned, but I may only do the first 4, see how things are, because I'm working on another series that I'm getting out for this summer that deals with a group of kids, Scooby-Doo-like gang that investigates paranormal events and things like Bigfoot. I've got that, and I'm very excited about that series. I'm going to some conferences this summer and fall dealing with a big conference or a Mothman conference. And, so I want to make sure that book is ready. And I've got 6 or 7 of those already planned out in that series. So
yeah,
I'm going to finish Town Magician up to 4, which is the main 4 of the series. And I'll see how things go for the other ones that are planned. And then the Odd Questers. And I have another series. I've gotten 1 book almost ready, but I've kind of put it on the back burner. I need to get back to it and hopefully get that out too.
So we want to thank you for being on our show today and for sharing a little bit about your writing, your book, everything in general. Loved our behind the scenes convo about Star Wars. That was awesome.
Thank you much for having me on.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it as well.